So yeah, Stranger Things, a show that was widely considered to be pretty great. Now, I got into the show a little bit later than probably most people. I got into the show in 2019 when season 3 came out. That's when I started watching the show, and I fell in love with it, like everyone else. Like every normal person, I fell in love with it. I adored the show, and once I finally got to season 3, it was like, and then finished it, I'm like, well, I can't wait for season 4, and then, 3 years passed by, and it finally comes, and it didn't really disappoint. It didn't really disappoint. It's not the greatest season of the show, not at all. I wouldn't consider it that, but it definitely, it gave me what I wanted. I can't say I was disappointed, by this season at all. If anything, I was like really happy because it's like, I finally got to see Stranger Things again. The show that I've really, missed and have wanted another season for. And because of that, overall, I'm really glad that this season even exists, even if I did have problems with it here and there, I mean, there's some people that apparently really love this season. I think it's, amazing and stuff like that. I didn't personally think that, but I had a really great time with it, and I really wanted to, talk about it and share my love with it for you guys. So basically how this is going to work is I'm going to go over every episode, kind of review a lot of major plot points and like what I overall thought of the episode individually, and then we're going to kind of like go over a final verdict. And I feel like that's the best way to kind of review this season, because it's hard to really just review it as a whole. You really got to pick it apart. So with that said, let's start talking about episode 1.
If only could, I'd make a deal with God, and I'd get him to swap our places. Be running up that road, be running up that hill, be running up that bill.
I didn't really like this episode. I didn't really like this episode, if I'm being honest with everybody. It just wasn't overall that good in my opinion. I felt like once you get down to like how it started and like overall when you look at the episode as a whole and like the way it is, it just didn't have that high quality feeling that normally Stranger Things has, at least in my opinion, for the most part. Because when you get down to it, like normally with Stranger Things, like other episodes, you always have that feeling of this is high quality work. This is something that is like produced by, high quality directors, high quality actors that know what they're doing and understand how to construct a show. And when you get to this first episode, it doesn't really feel like that. It feels a little bit clunky, a little bit messy with the way, things are. It also doesn't really feel like, like with the way the dialogue is written, with the way the performances are, like they don't feel, like they don't feel high quality. Everyone that wasn't in the last 3 seasons, besides Eddie, does not do a very good job acting. Whoever plays Chrissy, I think her name is, something like that, she wasn't very good. The basketball star who's in this season and really is only in this season as, somewhat of like an antagonist or someone for Lucas to fight, once you get to around like the end of the season, he's not that good. He's like probably one of my biggest issues with the season. And it just like overall like Elle being bullied and stuff, those like are the most generic like 80s bullies that you see in every TV show and movie, and it feels so bland. That was one plot line I did not care for that like happened in this season. It did not work for me, at all. I just didn't really like it. It just wasn't that great. I will say though, the opening of this episode is amazing. I absolutely love the opening because it hints at things, it intrigues you, it hooks you in. That's one thing I even like about these first couple episodes, that even though I don't like them overall, the openings to them are great. The way they hook you in to new ideas that are going to be explained later out throughout the show, it definitely hooks you in with the opening to this episode. I love that opening. But the whole thing with Lucas, hitting the shot or whatever in a basketball game, that was such a like uninteresting plot line to me, and even though I like basketball, I didn't care for that at all. There's just like certain things that when it comes down to I just didn't really care for them. Like I sometimes, like, you know, when at the beginning of every Stranger Things episode, it's more down to earth about, you know, about, you know, the kids' problems, like every character's problems and like their issues and what's going on with their lives. It really does the worst at explaining and describing like having those problems out of any of them, because all of the problems are just, you know, not portrayed well and just aren't really, you know, like interesting or intriguing or like something I really care for, you know, because I don't watch the show just because I like the mystery. I also love the characters and I love seeing their journeys throughout the show and seeing them, you know, fix their problems, fix their issues, you know, develop as characters is something that's very overlooked in this show, and I love it when those you know, certain points happen. And even though it sets up problems that are going to be solved later on, you know, throughout the season, I don't feel like they're just as good, you know, as like, you know, the other seasons. And also there's like that whole plot line they were almost going to set up with Lucas, you know, apparently it seems like I was thinking, oh, they're gonna do this whole thing where Lucas is gonna like split up with everyone else and they're gonna get mad at him or whatever. I'm glad that didn't happen, because that would have been a terrible plot line, at least in my opinion. But you know, it overall not a very good first episode, but it gets better as it goes along.
If only could, I'd make a deal with God, and I'd get him to swap our places. Be running up that road, be running up that hill, be running up that building.
Okay, well, episode 2 was a little bit better because there were more interesting plot lines for the most part, because like there's the whole Hopper and Joyce thing that goes a little bit farther with, you know, Joyce trying to find Hopper and them figuring out clues and stuff like that and such. But really, besides that and the whole, Robin, Dustin, and Steve trying to, you know, figure out what's going on, everything else is very uninteresting and, you know, not something I really enjoyed. There's the whole like Elle getting bullied thing, which these are the most stereotypical bullies like ever, and it goes on for way too long. There's way too much of this, you know, going on, and I don't really care about any of it because it's just not really a plot line that's like handled well or like executed well. The dialogue with the whole thing is very bland. The acting isn't that buyable. Like I know I keep talking about how bad these bullies are as actors, but it's unbelievably shocking how cheesy and over the top they are. It just feels like it's straight from like any like high school movie from the 80s, and maybe that's what it's trying to go for, but I personally do not like it. And then there's, of course, you know, the basketball star, which I don't know the actor's name, I don't know the character's name, I don't really care. He does not do a very good job in this show, and it's continued throughout, you know, Also, I just that whole plot line with them, I really do not like, and there's even more of it here, and I just don't care for it. There's just so many plot lines that I don't care about, at least for now, and then for the most part, I start to care more about the plot lines, more about what's going on, because it gets, in my opinion, more interesting. But for some reason, when they try to do all this everyday life stuff, like things that are just normal going on in their lives, like, you know, how most seasons of Stranger Things start, it's not as good, it's not as interesting as it typically is, and because of that, I didn't really like the first couple episodes of this show very much. Also, I forgot to mention this, but there's this whole scene, like, you know, with like Fred that's supposed to be scary when all of them are like, you know, all these dead people are surrounding him saying murderer, 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 you know, that whole bit? Yeah, that was like the most like non-terrifying thing I think I've ever seen. Like that seems like a Nightmare on Elm Street parody. Like it felt like a parody or like some cheesy 80s horror movie. It really did not work at all in my opinion. That was like such a, you know, not very good scene. That whole plot line in general, you know, it was okay. It's just that part was so corny and like funny in a way, and it's not trying to be funny, but it kind of feels that way. But anyways, moving on to episode 3.
If only could, I'd make a deal with God, and I'd get him to
Episode 3. You know, pretty much everything from here on up is, you know, when it started to get, at least in my opinion, starting to get pretty good. This wasn't a great episode, but it starts to, like, pick up some of the pieces and sort of just start to push them, you know, a little bit farther, and, you know, make everything overall a little bit more interesting, in my opinion. Now, of course, it's still not a great episode. There isn't really anything specifically great about it that I could really, you know, talk about with you guys. I mean, I feel like all the plot lines just started to get a little bit better, you know? Of course, there's the whole thing with Elle and her going to jail. That makes that, which isn't a great plot line, and it's not something I care for that much, but it was better than, you know, what they were doing beforehand. And also, then there's, of course, you know, the plot line that probably carries this episode, which is, you know, Hopper and Joyce and all that, and Hopper, you know, about to break free, trying to break free at least from the Russian prison, which I really like. I think is a very, you know, and probably one of the best plot lines, you know, in the entire show. This is my opinion. Even if it doesn't have a ton to do with the original plot, at least I don't think it does. But, you know, it works overall on its own merits, and I really like it as a plotline. Still cannot stand, like, the whole bully plotline at all. That really does not work for me. It's probably my least favorite plotline, like, in Stranger Things, right next to, like, that whole, you know, spin-off thing they're trying to do in Season 2, which, you know, also does not work very well, of course. But getting back to Season 4, the police are so... None of them are good actors, really. And it's all just, like... It's all just a plotline you really don't care for, really, at all. Also, there's some pretty bad CGI in this episode with the whole Vecna's house and everything like that. I don't think it works, you know, personally. But, you know, there's, like, them slowly trying to figure out things. Pieces start coming together, and it's a pretty okay episode. So, yeah, next one.
If only could, I'd make a deal with God, and I'd get him to swap our places. We're running up that road, we're running up that hill, we're running up that building.
Yes, this is the one. This is the one that unintentionally popularized a Kate Bush song and made it so that you physically can't escape from it. But besides that, pretty good episode. There's some good things about this one. I feel like gradually as we go along, it gets better. Like, every episode just gets a little bit better as we get even farther into the story, in my opinion. At least that's how, you know, I see it. The only thing that doesn't really get better is the whole bully plotline, which is just overall not very good in, like, any way, shape, or form. Like, it's just such a bad plotline. And the more progresses, the less you like it, the more I get annoyed by it. It's just a bad plotline. But then, of course, there's Hopper. You know, it just the whole Russian plotline with Hopper, you know, escaping the prison. That was fantastic. I absolutely love that part of it. That is great. You know, that part overall is really great, and is probably most likely by far the best, you know, part about it. Of course, there's them, you know, discovering even more things. There's Victor Creel, I think his name is, and, you know, getting a little bit more backstory, building up the tension, and having us wonder a little bit more of who Vecna really is. And that whole thing, the way they build it up is just so great. It slowly builds it up, and as everything gets built up, it just gets better, you know, and after this is like, it only goes up from here, you know. It starts to become really fantastic after this episode. I think my only problem with this one is, I know it's a whole Max episode, but really I felt like it didn't make her that much more of an interesting character. I felt like they could have done a lot more with her character in this episode, and I don't think they did that much. Sure, there was this whole gravestone thing with Billy, and when, you know, we first saw that, I thought it was pretty good, you know. It did a pretty good job. But then apparently that's not how she truly felt, and she was lying to herself, so it kind of makes that whole thing kind of pointless, in my opinion, and just makes her character not just like you don't really know a character that well. And I wish we got to know Max a little bit more, you know. Maybe we will in season 5, but it's a little bit too late, especially since she's been here, you know, for like, what, 3 seasons? I mean, she was introduced in like season 2. She's been series for like 2.5 seasons now. We don't really know her character at all, but beyond that, it's a pretty good episode.
If only could, I'd make a deal with God, and I'd get him to swap our places. We're running up that
Okay, so episode 5. Everything from 4 on up are all very good episodes. Even if I do have problems with, pretty much all of them, they're all, at least in my opinion, pretty good episodes. And this is one that I would put under that category is pretty good. Of course, we continue the Hopper being put in jail thing as he, still is trying to come up with a plan to get out, and we, get a little bit more of that. That stuff is great. And once, we get to that, which we'll talk about pretty soon, is, in my opinion, pretty amazing. I think the best part about this episode, though, by far, is, Elle and exploring, flashbacks. That stuff, that plot line alone is better than anything in this season by a long shot, because we get to, see, we get to see a backstory for Elle, because we haven't really gotten any of that. And now that we finally get a little bit of that, it's interesting. It's not too much, it's not a ton, but we get a little bit of her backstory, and we understand a little bit more about Elle, even though we've already understood a decent amount of her in season 2. I feel like the way they did it in this season was a lot better than how they did it in the second season. It just works, the way they play it out, it just, works a lot better, at least in my opinion. I really did like that about this one. Of course, we get a little bit of the bullies, which I'm glad there isn't that much of it. I mean, I don't know if you could just consider them bullies, because, they're pretty much like psychopaths once you get, farther down the season. But, it doesn't matter. They're not in it that much, but also I really don't like them. And they hold this season down, a lot from being a really good season. I feel like, though, a big problem with this episode, and, what continues onwards, is I do not really like the whole Nancy Steve thing. I didn't think it was necessary. It just felt like a way to add a little bit of weird conflict that never added to anything or was anything at all, because once you get to the end of it, there's no conflict. It doesn't really matter. Nancy just goes back with Jonathan. It's just them kind of flirting a little bit, and then Steve and Nancy don't end up together, and there's no conflict there. It just kind of ends. It's just a thing that happens a little bit, and then it kind of ends. And I feel like when it comes to stuff like that, I don't like it. When you give a plot line and then you just cut it off, I'm gonna point it out as a problem, because it is a problem, and that is something that they just randomly add in here, and it's just weird. I don't like it. There's way too much of it in this season, and it's just overall kind of annoying. But beyond that, really like this one, really like this episode, and it gets better and better. So yeah, let's just get to the episodes that are even better than this one.
If only could, I'd make a deal with God, and I'd get him to swap our places. Be running up that road, be running up that hill, be running up that building.
Okay, so yeah, this was also a pretty good episode. The thing is, this whole show from episode 4 to episode 6, all of those are pretty good episodes, really good episodes. Then once you get to 7, 8, and 9, that's when you get to the masterpieces, the great episodes of this show. But right now, this is the last, what I consider really good episode, really good, or at least pretty good, around that area. But anyways, talking about the episode, I really liked how we got to see more of Elle's personal traumas that she was dealing with. Seeing all of those parts of her backstory and all that horror and trauma and being bullied and harassed her entire life, it makes her a lot more of a tragic character and a sad character that you really can sympathize and feel bad for. But also, it's just interesting, stuff about her. We get to learn new things about her, and seeing that overall is just, like I said before, the best plot line in this entire show. Not in this entire show, but this entire season. At least in my opinion. Maybe some people don't think it that way, but out of all these little plot lines, out of all these little things that I'm tying together, this is by far, the best of all of them. Also, there's, Hopper and, all the other people in the Russian prison fighting the Demogorgons, going to fight them. It's all great. That stuff is really good. I really like that like little plot line that, of course, ties into a lot later on, like as in like next episode around that. It's all, that part is all great. I love that. Also the stuff with Susie, that whole little plot point where they had to find location, that was pretty fun and entertaining. Overall, it wasn't an episode I really had any problems with. It was just a pretty fun episode. Just a pretty fun episode in my opinion.
If only could, I'd make a deal with God, and I'd get him to swap our places. We're running up that road, we're running up that hill, we're running up that building.
Okay, so episode 7. If they were gonna like split these into 2 parts in any way, shape, or form, this was probably the best way to do it, if anything. At least in my opinion, because it ends it on such a perfect note, and it ends in such like, a great way that I feel like it just wouldn't work if they split it up in with any other parts. Like if they did like episode 6 and then had 7, 8, and 9, it wouldn't work as well. And the reason why I say that is because there are so many twists that are revealed, so many unanswered questions. Also, you should not be watching this, by the way, if you haven't seen the season, so I am gonna spoil this stuff. That whole twist with like one being Vecna, I did not see that coming at all. I was so surprised when I saw that. That was such a crazy and unpredictable twist. Of course, one betraying Elle wasn't a big surprise, but then everything else just kind of was. Like that whole Vecna twist just blew my mind. I didn't see it coming at all. I was wondering, how are they going to tie this into everything else that's been going on? And they did such a great job at that, in my opinion. It worked so perfectly well. Like, I loved it for that. Also, seeing like Hopper, finally escape and then reconnecting with Joyce. Like that one scene where you just see them staring at each other. Like, even if it's just for a couple seconds, I love that scene. I love that scene so much. It is such a perfect scene, in my opinion. It is something just so pleasant and just amazing. And then, of course, you see them after that, talking and stuff. And it's, it's just, like, because they've been apart for so long. And then seeing them finally together is just such a nice feeling. But, of course, then there's all this other stuff that happens with the whole, Harry, Eddie, all of them going into the Upside Down and all that stuff, which was kind of a fun little adventure. It wasn't all that great in my opinion, but I would be lying to myself if I said that I didn't enjoy that. Overall, a great episode, a great way to end off the first part of the season. I thought it was phenomenal. I really loved it. Like I said, 7 through 9 are all phenomenal episodes, some of the best in Stranger Things. So let's move on to another fantastic episode.
If only could, I'd make a deal with God, and I'd get him to swap our places. We're running up that road, we're running up that hill, we're running up that building.
This was a really great episode in my opinion. I felt like what this episode did such a good job at is building up the stakes, building the tension, building everything up slowly from that we know is gonna happen in the finale. Everything that is soon to happen is all being slowly built up in this episode, and it's been like that throughout the entire season. If anything, it's a season that slowly takes its time with everything that's going on and just builds it up bit by bit until we get to the big finale, which we'll talk about later. And that's what's so great about this season. I'll talk about that maybe a little bit once we get to the final verdict. But this is a really great episode in my opinion that builds up everything. There's that scene where Elle's papa dies. That which was a decently emotional scene. That was in a way kind of like, because mainly the reason why it's so emotional is because of everything that he has done to her, everything that has happened, that all that build up, and then seeing it all end you don't know how to feel. You know, you don't know how you're supposed to react to that because it was like such this big, you know, relationship that was so important. And then seeing it end, you know, you can feel any certain way. You can think that he was a terrible person, he was a great person, or anything. You know, of course he clearly wasn't a great person, but you can think that he was someone that was loving and cared for his daughter, or was someone that really didn't at all and was just using her because he thought that she was powerful, and that's kind of it. But I mean, there's all that interpretations, you know, with that, in my opinion. It's just like an episode, like I said before, it's just an episode that takes its time to build up everything that we know is going to happen in the finale. So let's get to the greatest episode of this entire season by far, the finale.
If only could, I'd make a deal with God, and I'd get him to swap our places. We're running up that road, we're running up that hill, we're running up that building.
Okay, so the final finale. You know, the whole shebang, the whole ending to this season. And for the most part, it was really great. I didn't have that many problems with it. I think I just had one problem with it, and I'm gonna get out of the way so we can talk about everything else that I loved about this finale. Max should have died. I'm just being honest when I say this. Max really should have died because, you know, I hate it. I hate it when there's always a fake death. You know, when a character dies and then they like, oh, we're gonna get her back. And I know that it's not fully confirmed that she's coming back, but let's be honest, she's in a coma. She's more than likely gonna come back in the next season. It's just gonna happen. It's probably what's gonna happen. And I don't know. I hate fake death scenes. I hate it when they like are saying, oh, they're gonna die, and then they don't die. You know, scenes like that really annoy me. I hate them almost every time because 9 times out of 10 they're very predictable. This one I guess wasn't, but either way it still made me mad because Max dying would have added stakes. You know, it would have shown that this show is not afraid to kill off characters, like main characters. You know, main ones that we've been with for a much longer time. And so far, Stranger Things hasn't really done that. Instead, they'll just kill off side characters here and there. And I feel like that's one thing about Stranger Things I have not really liked, is they have not like had, you know, the courage to kill off any of their main characters. It's always a side character that gets killed off. More likely than not, it's when they were introduced in like the first season. Like the first season that they're in, they're killed off, you know, one of those side characters. That's how I was able to predict that Eddie was gonna die. Because I was like, oh, okay, well, he's new. He's probably gonna be the one to die. And I was not surprised when it happened. Everyone thought Steve was gonna die, and I was thinking, Steve's not gonna die. Every single season, it's always like one of the characters, that gets introduced right away, and then they're instantly killed off. I just knew it was gonna be Eddie. I just knew it just because of that alone. But yeah, Max, in my opinion, should have died, or they shouldn't have even like tried to like have her almost die at all. I just don't think it should work, especially with it now. Apparently, Elle can revive people now. Doesn't that make her a bit too overpowered? At least in my opinion, I think that makes her a bit too overpowered. Cause like Elle can do a lot of things, you know. She's pretty much like the reason why everyone in this show is alive. Having like her now being able to bring people back from the dead, it's a little bit too much, you know. I don't like a character that's that overpowered that they can like do anything, you know. I don't like that. That's just, you know, my opinion. But I don't know. Do you like overpowered characters? I don't know. But with all those flaws out of the way, with all that stuff that, you know, I didn't like out of the way, this was still a great finale. This was a fantastic finale that gave me pretty much anything I could ever ask for. And maybe you could say, oh, that is fan service, and maybe it kind of is, but also it's so great to watch like these type of finales from Stranger Things, because they give you what you want, they give you everything that they've been building up to, and you just love them so much because there's so much to like root for, to care about, and to be invested in overall. Just seeing the finale is just something. It's just something special, you know? Anytime there's a Stranger Things finale, it's always special and it's always enjoyable. And this might be one like this might be like the second greatest Stranger Things finale out of all 4 seasons. It's definitely it is so good, and I guess we should get into part of why it's so great. Of course, you have the conclusion with Hopper and Joyce finally making it out of the Russian base and like going home, and of course them fighting the Demogorgons. Which I kind of forgot to mention. It doesn't make sense how them fighting the Demogorgons increases their chances of winning or something like that, and that's why they did it. I think they just wanted a cool, little fight segment with them in there, and it was fun. It was entertaining. It was a complete blast to watch. I loved that part. Of course, you could say, why the heck is there someone with a medieval sword? But I don't care. That part was just like too fun to not absolutely, have fun with. And then, of course, there's the tension-filled aspect with Vecna and Al and Max, and this whole dream thing that is like probably a callback to Nightmare on Elm Street. It definitely is, but it's not completely ripping it off at all at the same time, which I think is good. That whole segment was great. It was fun. It was enjoyable. It was also tension-filled, and somewhat terrifying in a way. I guess you could say. I guess you could put it, that way. The way the third act comes together, the way all the pieces just align, and then seeing it all end, it's so satisfying. And I feel like the reason why this season overall worked so well, why this series overall worked so well, was because it was all a continuous story. Not just because it was a continuous story, but the reason why it did work so well was because how slowly it built it up. It took its time with the story. It took its time to, unravel the mysteries, to introduce the mystery first off, then sort of unravel it, then sort of like slowly build up to the third act with the characters, with with how they're gonna get into the upside down and all that stuff, and just slowly building up to such a big finale. And I feel like that's what every Stranger Things season is. It's all about introducing a supernatural aspect and then building up to the finale. And it always works. And while it seems so simple with the way they do it, it works so well. It's so entertaining to watch. Every episode is amazing. And it's rewatchable too. It's a show I could rewatch, constantly and still have a great time with it every single time. And while I didn't adore this season, while I didn't love this season and think it was the greatest thing ever, I really appreciated it in a lot of ways. I felt like there were some really great shots, the Duffer Brothers. Normally when it comes to the Stranger Things seasons, they don't have the amazing cinematography. It's not bad, but normally they don't try to go for anything great with the cinematography. But there's shots in here that really look great. Sometimes even stunning, you could say. And it really overall, when you look at the season, even though I didn't really like the first couple episodes, just looking at it as a whole, looking at how it unravels and just ends as a whole, it's such a good season. It really is. I wasn't really disappointed by it. Of course, my expectations weren't exceeded. Like, they weren't, above what I expected. It was around, what I expected. It was some really, really good Stranger Things stuff. And I had a great time watching it. But also, I got to really experience, some high quality television at the same time. I would give this season an 8.5 out of 10. I really, really liked it. But I didn't love it as much as, season 1 or, season 3, I wouldn't really put it in that category. But it also is just, it is such a great season. And I feel like the fact that we're on season 4 now, and the quality is still so consistent and good is honestly a shocker. Because once you get to season 4, season 5 of a lot of TV shows, that's when they start to kind of lose steam. But somehow the show just still doesn't get better and better, but still keeps that consistent quality of just being really good television. And can't wait for season 5. This is a show that I have loved through and through, and I'm gonna be so excited once we get that final season. I cannot wait for it at all. But that's gonna be the video, guys. If you want me to do more reviews on TV shows, I'm considering doing some. I have a BoJack Horseman season 1 review if you're into that. I'm also gonna probably do a couple more. I'm gonna do a lot more of that with BoJack Horseman. And hey, maybe you'll rank the Stranger Things seasons or have a Stranger Things characters tier list or anything like that, you know. Stranger Things, it's a great show. It's a very popular show. And I wanted to, you know, review it. So there you go. Hope you guys liked the video and enjoyed it. Bye.
If only